Hello, hello. Thank you everybody for being here today. Today we're so fortunate to get to hang out and speak with the very futuristic Kirsty Kilbride, author of Spaceships Passing in the Night. And first and foremost, I feel like I say this about so many stories, but when it comes to sci-fi, because it is my favorite genre, there was so much of this story that I absolutely adored, from the character development and also just like that ragtag crew. There was elements of Becky Chambers in here. There was elements of just that whole cozy journey where obviously the plot line itself was harrowing at times, but it was written in a way where it felt comfortable and I felt supported throughout the reading process. And it was really a really gentle, albeit horrific read at times, and I'm really grateful for that. You did real good. You did real well balancing that.
Thank you. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
I knew that this would be a big hit with the subscribers. Also knew it would be a big hit with Ryan because I know really well what Ryan likes at this stage. And Ryan, the first time I met him, we wouldn't stop talking about The Martian,
Yeah, I love The
which I think
Martian.
he
Yeah.
just read. And this gave me not similar because it's a very different type of story, obviously, but in the way that it's a very approachable kind of sci-fi. It doesn't bombard you with technical information, doesn't bother getting into the weeds on the details with things, but there's so much depth there. And it's almost kind of comforting, like the setting itself. Like it's a really comfy setting. I really like the world building that he done. Worlds plural, I guess. So I'd want to start off with getting you to tell us a little bit about how you came up with the setting. Like, did it come from the ground up? Did it come from somewhere? Where did that all come from?
It came very slowly in bits and pieces over time. I've always read a lot of sci-fi. I've played sci-fi games like Mass Effect where you're exploring lots of different worlds. So
We're going to be friends,
that's
Kirsten.
yeah, that's definitely had a massive influence. I used to write a lot of short stories and just being able to explore, well, what I used to really like focusing very much on aliens as well initially. And what if it's this type of alien, and what if they can't see, and what if they live underground, and um, yeah, just exploring different avenues that way. And then the other half of it, so that's kind of like the sci-fi half, comes from I love Terry Pratchett, and I
Oh,
love how very cozy his setting feels and very optimistic. And wanted to kind of bring those two things together and have quite an optimistic, slightly kind of comedic, slightly whimsical future.
Well, and I
I
think
think it's on you go, Ryan.
I was
But I
just
mean,
gonna say.
Terry Pratchett was mentioned, so I gotta say something.
No, that's fair. I'll throw it in a second. I just wanted to say like to both of your points there, and I think specifically to Steve's, like when it comes to the accessibility of everything, and the world building and all that, I think because it is sci-fi, people can get lost in the weeds of the details or this or that, but this was a very relatable story. Like we've all had breakups, we've all had to deal with trauma in one capacity or another. And I think it's really you created a world in which those kind of heavier topics can be discussed in a way that is incredibly relatable to pretty much every reader once you hit a certain age. So I think that in itself made it really powerful. But yeah, Steve, go ahead with Terry Pratchett.
Well, I'm a huge Pratchett fan. Love the Discworld books. Grew up reading them, and I think one of the things that Pratchett does incredibly well is balances a lighter-hearted, humorous, down-to-earth kind of family vibe almost with like regular atrocities and murder and horror and death, and there's all sorts of bad things happening in Discworld. But it's always got a little bit of a twist to it. There's always something to make you smile afterwards, and I
Yeah,
got that vibe a
definitely.
lot with this book. It's funny that you say that because I'd written that in my notes maybe about 40, 50 pages in. And I think when I sent it to Ryan the first time, I went, this is giving me kind of Terry Pratchett and space vibes.
Oh, I'm so glad.
So it's worked. What's your favorite Terry Pratchett book?
Thud. I
Yeah.
really like
Oh,
the City
yeah.
Watch books.
Where's My Cow? Yeah, Sam Vimes
Yes.
is my favorite Discworld character, hands down. I love Sam Vimes.
But I think
Yeah, I was
uh,
just gonna say, I think he's a good example of a very relatable,
yeah.
things out of your control and things being tough, but just kind of keeping going.
Well, I think it's also, I don't know how it is in the UK, but it is quoted pretty consistently in the US, the boot index and everything like that.
Yes,
So
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
the idea that like these are fantasy stories, these are sci-fi stories, these are fiction, but they're very rooted in fact. They're very rooted in reality. And I think sometimes it does take you looking at yourself or you looking at the world from a different perspective and a different lens like that for things to really click for you. Because you can explain the boot theory 100 times over, but then if you put it in a story that you're engaged in, it's like trying to memorize notes, and then you realize if you just sing them, it's gonna work better.
Yeah.
I don't think I've tried that one yet. But so I've seen a lot of the inspirations then that kind of went into it. And Mass Effect as well. There's a lot of Mass Effect kind of vibes in it as well. Also something where there's regular atrocities, but there's also lighter-hearted moments. How did you go about balancing them? It's something that I've always found impressive when other people pull it off.
Yeah, it was hard and it wasn't something I was sure I was doing right until I showed it to other people. But the way I approach editing is so when I finish a first draft, won't look at it for a few months. And then I come back to it and I bullet point and color code everything that's happening in each chapter and try and like map that out on a timeline. And then you can see when certain characters disappear for a bit because you've not covered whatever they're up to and whatever elements. So you can kind of get a visual indicator of, oh, this bit is very heavy in this part of the plot. And you can decide whether that's okay or whether you need to balance it out a bit more.
Wow, that's by far one of the most organized approaches to it that I've heard from one of our
All
authors that
right.
we've featured so far.
It's my first drafts aren't organized at all, so I need to make up for it later.
I like to have a running, so the draft that I'm working on, there will be like 20 pages below it of just random notes and things that I've thought of while I'm writing it.
Yeah,
And usually
yes,
by the time I finish the first draft, I can then read the rest of the notes and go back through and kind of do it again, but better this time.
yes, yeah, I do that.
I was
It's
gonna say,
interesting. On you go. Go
I
ahead,
was just
sorry.
gonna say, like speaking of inspirations, Terry Pratchett. I know when we last spoke, there was big inspiration. I'm sure it's obviously still the case, but big inspiration from Becky Chambers and like Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. And I know what makes her stories always stand out to me is the character, not just the characters, but the inter-character relation, the relationships amongst characters, the character dynamics. That's the word I'm looking for. The character dynamics. How did you? Like what was kind of the dynamic you were going for? Because you end up by the end of the story, you have a bit of a ragtag crew. You got people from kind of all over, and they find that balance. Was there a vibe you were trying to hit from the get-go, or
It was kind of a ragtag cruise, strangers coming together and we've kind of found family-ish.
found family?
Um, but and then specific dynamics between the characters like Drake and Elise, the bounty hunters.
Mhm.
I knew their dynamic was kind of best friends that are looking out for each other all the time. Um,
And I think
that was
it's always nice when you get that reaffirmed when you have like the two bounty hunters. I think there was a moment where we might have thought that that turns romantic or whatnot, but it is also nice. It's very nice when you can just appreciate it being a friendship and not having to force it into being more.
yeah, I was keen to keep it a friendship. Uh, I think that's just a nice dynamic to have.
Mm.
Yeah, especially between men and women in fiction. There's always, we live in the age, well, God, I imagine some of us grew up in the age of shippers taking over everything online. Uh, but it's always nice to read like platonic friendships, especially between, like, I got the impression when I was reading it that you probably workshop your characters or do some kind of exercise with them to develop personality and character to them. They all really stood out. They all had something going on under the surface as well. Could you talk a little bit about how you came up with the characters and how you developed them?
Yeah, thank you. I wrote a lot of short stories about them at various stages. Drake and Elise had a few short stories before I came to the novel. I was
Mhm.
inspired by things like Cowboy Bebop, quite like the ragtag of
Yep.
bounty hunters and that, so I was keen to do that.
A bit
Um,
of Firefly in there as well.
I've never watched it. It's my like
What?
white whale of sci-fi. I've never watched it.
Oh, I
Uh,
thought for sure. I'm usually so good at that, at figuring out where people have
it
maybe
sounds
planned
like
them.
I would love it.
Oh, you would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guarantee you would. It's really great. If you like Mass Effect, you'll love Firefly. It's basically the same thing, but with space cowboys. If you like Cowboy Bebop, it's
Yeah.
the same
No, it
thing.
sounds great. Um,
Hypothetically, as somebody who was a fan of the characters, if I maybe wanted to potentially very, very much so read these short stories, are they available somewhere?
four of them are. I deliberately wrote short stories set just before the novel and
Oh,
released them in the run-up to the novel. So it's kind of like a here's where these characters are
that's really cool.
just before. So those are available on my website, which is kpkilbride.com.
Perfect.
There's one for Roz, one for Harsha, one for Finn, and then one for Drake and Elise combined where they're off on an adventure.
That's
Neat.
Um,
So they're like a
it's
proper little prequel for the main cast, basically.
yeah,
And did you do that with the intention of finding out more about them, or did you kind of have a plan going into it?
No, these ones were specifically what could I do in the run up to the release. Other ones I did between drafts were just kind of around writing prompts. Like one was write how each character responds to a sunrise, and so Roz works the night shift, so it's her coming out of work, and it's Harsha getting up early for work, that kind of thing. So when I was developing the characters, it was more things like that, more insights into their daily life. But
Hmm.
then, yeah, the ones that I released were specifically, yeah, meant to be a little bonus introduction to anyone interested.
I've always been a big fan of all the very because that's the beauty of the indie space is that everybody has a very different approach when it comes to marketing. Everyone has a very different approach when it comes to writing. Um, so it's cool to see that you actually did kind of a run up to the release. Do you find did you find it to be positive? Did you find it to have, I guess, results for lack of a better word? Obviously, the stories themselves stand, but
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to judge. I guess I'm getting a better sense of it now, social
Hmm.
media, because I wasn't online that much before the release.
Mhm.
But it's certainly been nice connecting with other sci-fi authors on Instagram, and getting a lot of inspiration from what other people are doing as well. Because it's very hard to come up with ideas of what do other people want to see. I tried to, for the most part, think what would I want to see as a reader if I was on social media
Hmm.
about, each of the characters or about the plot. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's been a lot of learning.
marketing's really hard, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, really hard.
Marketing.
For all the authors we've spoken with, I have never met one that goes, yeah, I hated writing. It's the marketing I've really been excited about this whole time.
Yeah.
I think, we all learn and like this is doing the little short stories and the little prequels to each character, to some of the characters, isn't something I've heard before. Like I know people releasing short stories in newsletters or this and that, but that's a really cool idea and a really cool concept. Um, that I will tell more people to try.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I would love to see it as a reader. I'd
Mhm.
come across the idea mainly actually from the reverse perspective of I saw someone saying if you're a romance author, actually releasing a little epilogue or a 1 year down the line can be very popular.
Oh, okay.
Um, so I wouldn't rule out doing some set after the novel.
Mhm.
But
Well, that was another question that I had was, would you want to write some things for after the novel? Because I thought it ended on a great note that you could just leave it as is and it would stand on
yes,
its own really well. Like I really liked the ending. I hate downer endings. I really like this ending.
Yeah.
I'm
Uh,
glad to, yeah.
I
Especially because
won't get
it
into
could it
spoilers.
could have gone real south.
Yeah, it could have gone a
Yeah.
lot worse. Uh, but are there any plans to go anywhere else with the universe or do anything else set in the same universe now that you've kind of established it?
Yeah, definitely. I'm working on something else in the same universe at the moment. I really like standalones.
Mhm.
Mhm.
as a reader and a writer, so it would be a kind of a separate story. But I think there's a lot to explore in the universe. Spaceships Passing the Night doesn't have a huge amount of the aliens, and I would like to do more of that.
Mhm.
Um, yes, definitely.
How did you go about kind of because there is I think from words from one perspective it's very accessible sci-fi in that you don't need to like it's not hard sci-fi which is great but on the other hand there are elements of the transporter and everything like that was that always going to be the kind of main crux of the issue or
Mhm.
did that get workshopped and developed over time?
I don't plan my novels before I go in, and I do more these days. But 5 years ago, when I started this, I didn't. So I
Mhm.
didn't know what the crux of it was going to be until I got there. So that
Understand.
was developed after the fact. I was very much finding my way as I went with the first
Mhm.
draft.
Huh.
It's no surprise then that like so much of your work goes into the edit
Yeah.
because you managed to make it seem like it was all deliberate from the get-go.
I'm glad. Yeah. No, my second, I think my second draft is more what people would expect from a first draft.
No,
Because
interesting.
I have to do a lot of, funnily enough, a lot of restructuring to make it
Yeah.
all go. But I really enjoy not planning the first draft, and then I really enjoy structuring the second draft. Like that's the phase I really enjoy of writing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I've said
obviously
before
it
that I
worked.
think was that
I
Ryan,
was
sorry?
just gonna say, obviously it worked. Like, don't fix
Yeah.
what ain't broke. Like,
Yeah, I've said before that I think a lot of the actual work of going into making a good book, like making the prose stand out, making the dialogue flow, getting the vibe right and everything, getting the pacing right. I think a lot of that really hard work happens in drafts after the first. The first draft is very much like and however way that you do it, it's very much a splurge to get everything out,
mhm.
get the fresh clay there that you can then shape into something that's got more shape to it.
yeah.
Would you say it's on par with like discovery writing? Is it to that kind of level?
Yes, I think so. I these days I tend to have what I call the tent poles of the story, which are kind of the main points, and then I work out my way between them. So I'm never that far off track. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, at the time of writing Spaceships Passing in the Night, I was just kind of going with what that I thought the next interesting step would be.
Mhm.
So very much kind of discovering it, or I like the term gardener as well, where you
Oh,
kind
right,
of
yeah.
vaguely know what you're planting, but you never know how it's going to turn out until it's yeah, it's all grown.
One of the things I wanted to ask about because, like, since we're talking about writing, every time we get novels through our submissions and whatnot, we do give it when we read, we do give it an edit. Spacious Passing in the Night was top three, if not like the best edited, formatted story that we received. Was there like what was your process for that? Was there a team involved? Was it just you? Do you did you go through multiple iterations? Like,
I was very lucky to work with some great editors. I did I did three drafts by myself, then got some people to beta read it, and then I did a fourth draft. And at that point, I knew I'd booked a developmental editor, and then
mm,
that's what I called draft five, and that was a lot of I learned a lot through that. That was really, really valuable.
mm,
I think it completely, like the book wouldn't be where it is without that. And then I worked with a copy editor as well to polish it all up. The grammar and punctuation is a complete blind spot for me. It
Oh,
just,
yeah. I feel you.
uh, I get so lost. And also, maybe you'll relate to Steve, but a lot of Scottishisms in my
Yeah,
writing as well that I didn't realise were
yep.
oh,
Starting
until we
sentences
get,
with but, using how instead
yeah.
of why, things like that.
Yeah, beta readers caught a lot of that because they're like, what does this mean? Oh, okay. But then
Yeah,
copy editing helped with that as well.
no, that's
I've
interesting. I think that's the big thing with indie is just how there's such variety and how there's some people have a team, some people use resources available to them, and it's cool to see all the different ways that you can go about it. But yeah, I will say Spacious Passing in the Night, even as a submission, came in incredibly polished. Like, well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, it definitely showed. And as I'm sure you're familiar, if you're kind of out and about in the indie scene anywhere, a lot of indie books live and die on their presentation. Uh, Between kind of shoddy covers, not great blurbs, uh, bad formatting and stuff. And like I'm happy to admit, as I'm sure I often do, that like my first ever novel was a quarter of a million word long, unedited pile of it was a mess, man. Uh, so I totally sympathize. But am I right in thinking that this is your first book that you've put out?
Yes, yeah, not my first
Ooh,
written. My first written was also far too long and a complete mess. But yeah, this is my first published. Yeah.
that's really
That's funny. That was going to be my question was, is this the first like fully complete work that you've ever produced, or is this just the first one that you published? So
Yeah,
obviously
first
this
published.
published.
First I've taken this far. I have a lot of projects that I only did up to the second draft in because that was the part I enjoyed, and then stopped.
dang. That's really cool. I think there's always something to be said about kind of honing in and like I guess like practicing and improving your work and your skill set and then going into it because now like your debut novel is a very well polished, very well read, like easy to go through, accessible story. And I think the downside is you set the bar really high for yourself. But on, like, on the upside, like it was a great way to kick off a writing career.
Yeah, I'm so pleased to hear you say that because it's obviously even though I'd had beta readers read it and editors, you just never know how people are going to respond, and it's been really
Mhm.
nice hearing what people have thought of it, particularly some of my family who don't read sci-fi who've enjoyed it. That's been really nice as well. That's been really gratifying to hear that because I always hoped it would be quite accessible, but you never really know until you put it in front of someone who hasn't read sci-fi before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of the challenge that we run into is because we're changing genres and themes every month. We gotta focus on the more accessible stories, and we want people to be able to recognize like they might not adore sci-fi, but they can still appreciate a well-written story. And I think going back to the point we made earlier about how you made this relatable, like the things that Ross has to deal with. Obviously, we're not all dealing with this trans like universal like thing, but like we've had breakups, we've had this and that, we've had awkward moments with family and whatnot that make it relatable. And I think one of the things I wanted to ask about was Roz. I loved Roz as a character. Um, I thought she was wonderful because you take a fish out of water who's finally gotten her dream job, and that's just not what you expect. And then it's this idea of like what's next, but there was also this element of like fame where everybody knew who she was, but she just kind of worked in a little studio. And I I guess the question, it's in part question, in part more of a statement at this point. It was just really cool. But how was it always going to be a radio show?
Uh, yes, because I'd originally written Roz and her at the time the novel ex-girlfriend in a long distance short story where they were listening to the radio. So then it was kind of a natural jump that Roz really liked the radio and maybe she was a radio host. And
Hmm.
so yeah, that was kind of one of the first parts of her character.
Dang.
It was one of the things that I noted through the story that I wanted to ask you about was I love how radio plays such a big part in it.
Yeah.
Like futuristic sci-fi, but it really ties it down. And like, every morning on the drive to work, I listen to the radio. My wife likes to put the radio in the background sometimes. And I wondered if radio or background noise or something was like a comfort thing for you that you wanted to bring into the story for the
Oh,
character.
absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not generally been radio, but just having a random mix on Spotify or a
Mhm.
YouTube stream as well of people just chatting or usually playing games, kind of cozy streams. It's
Mhm.
nice background
Yeah.
noise.
I
Yeah.
remember a while back when Twitch started their Twitch creative venture, and they announced it with a non-stop 24-hour stream of Bob Ross and the joy of painting.
Oh, wow.
And I
That'd be
just used to
lovely.
stick it on while I was working.
Yeah.
It was great, man.
No, this I think it's something to be said about it because then like they're on a spaceship going in between planets and galaxies and whatnot. But yeah, they're still listening to the radio. And then I was thinking because I've been driving a lot over the summer, you get stuck with the ads. And in my head,
Yeah.
I'm sitting here being like, what would these alien ads be like? What would the transition be once you get out of like the range of one radio station to another? Like, what is space static? Uh,
I've been desperately trying to write some sort of short story where it jumps between different alien stations, but I can never
oh,
get it to work in a, I don't know, a smooth way because I that really appeals to me as well as what adverts do you get and yeah, what different talk shows do different species have or
yeah, yeah. The
different
different
gossip shows.
Yeah.
the different ads, the different languages. I think
Yeah.
languages and communication is always so interesting to me. Uh, but yeah, I
Space
think
traffic updates.
yeah, traffic
Yeah.
updates. You never think about traffic when you're in space, but it's got to exist at some point.
Oh, especially if you're going to a planet or a space station, you must get
Yeah.
congestion.
Yeah. I it's things like that when it comes to the world building that like these are the little nuances that you don't really get into when you're writing because there's so much more plot line to go around. But when it comes to like the actual world building development, I think it says a lot where like we start asking these questions because the world that you built feels so real that we're sitting here being like they're playing requests. So they're probably getting really weird requests from really different cultures, really different environments, really different like species. And that was something I really had a moment like diving into mentally and be like, yeah, we should elaborate. We should explore this more.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one that sits and does that.
Well, it just makes me think of like Hitchhiker's Guide and stuff like that as well.
Yes, yeah, I loved Hitchhiker's Guide, yeah. That's a kind
Uh,
of another influence similar to Terry Pratchett, where it's just a bit
Mhm.
absurd, some of the stuff it points out about daily life that I
mhm.
really like. Um,
It's very much like there's a huge crossover between Terry Pratchett fans and Douglas Adams fans.
yeah,
That same kind of
yes.
tongue-in-cheek yet extremely poignant.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well,
Like you'll see them both quoted in like inspirational posters and stuff, but also people posting segments from it that are just funny and funny were 20, 30, 40 years ago when they were released and still funny today.
Yes.
it's all about the balance. I think if you're not lulling your reader into a sense of like a false sense of security or comedy or something, then I think the powerful moments won't hit as much. But I know that there were a lot of potential quotes for the bookmarks and stuff when I was reading this. I don't have them off the top of my head, but I do remember this story being a very quotable one, and I think that's in part from the cozy aspect of it and like I want to say almost philosophical at times because like you're kind of going through it and it's like everybody back home hates me. I've burnt that bridge. I can't go back. It's like, well, that's not necessarily true. Like you don't know until you try and you had and forgive me, I forget his name, but you had the student that joined them.
Yeah,
Physics
Finn.
guy.
Finn, yeah, you
Yeah.
had Finn, who's just like kind of coming in on his own. And the idea of like, even though he's new to the crew wants to take care of him, and the crew wants him to have a better life than they had because although it looks like sunshine and rainbows, the actual life that the bounty hunters are living is not one of like it's not one that people would be envious of.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
But
I'm just looking at how much time we've got left. We've got about 4 minutes.
Oh,
And there's
wow.
one other question that I really wanted to get in before we start wrapping up and talking about where people can find your work and stuff. And I'm going to just wrap two questions into one here because I think you answered one of them earlier, talking about how you structure your book and the edit. Because I thought the juggling of the points of view, the different perspective characters, was brilliantly done, and a lot of authors trip up on that. So that, as well as just generally, your style is very, very readable, and I'm so curious if there's anything that you consciously or deliberately do to keep it readable, or if it's something you have to make it readable in subsequent drafts. So I was curious if you could talk about that a little.
The balancing of the point of view was something I got a lot of advice on from my developmental editor.
Right.
because that was something I felt I struggled with until that
Good
point.
stuff.
So that really helped to have like an outside point of view on that. And
Yeah.
then I I don't know, I kind of write the way I speak a lot of the time, although I do have to go back and make some of it make sense. And I did read it out loud a couple of times
Oh yeah.
to see where I tripped over it. So I think that helped as well, because sometimes when I've read the book so many times, I can easily skim things. But when you start to say it out loud, you go, well, actually, that's not very clear.
Mhm.
Yeah, I get you. You almost get blind to the actual, like I find I skip little bits of my own writing, and usually if I'm
Uh-huh.
skipping it, it means that there's definitely going to be a typo in there when I finally print it.
Yes. Yeah.
So on that note though, there is 2 minutes left, and I want to make sure we don't feel too rushed at the ending. For I know you mentioned your website earlier. For people
Yep.
who did like Spaceships Passing in the Night, we'll make sure that we link all of that. That way they can go back and read the short stories that are available on your website too. Um, words? What do you have coming up next? Do you have an ETA?
Um, kind of maybe end of 2027, early 2028, I think is what
Okay.
we're looking at.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I'm actively working on stuff.
That's exciting. I
Hopefully some short stories in the meantime as well.
Hmm.
mhm, mhm.
Keep the
Uh,
drip feed going.
what was that,
What was
Steve?
that,
Sorry.
sorry?
I said keep the drip feed going.
Yeah,
Give us a little something.
yeah.
Keep us in.
No, it's one of those things where I think like you said, like it's a standalone, it can read as a standalone, but this is where in part I see the similarity with Becky Chambers in that it's all within one universe. So I'm excited to like as you were saying earlier, explore the rest of the universe that you've created. Because I think I think what in part what makes it so tough with a debut novel and a debut world like this is because the novel itself isn't the longest. I think it's like 200-ish pages, 300 pages that it gets to a point where when there's so much world building that gets done and you did it in such a seamless way that I think you've done the hard part of building the world and now it's exciting because now we get to explore the world. So very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
But on that note, has less than a minute left and sometimes we get cut off. So thank you so much for joining us, Kirsty. If you somehow made it this far in the interview and you forgot, it's Spaceships Passing in the Night. It's a cool book. Highly recommend. But thank you guys so much again for joining us and take care. See you soon.
Yeah, thank you so
Bye,
much.
Bye.